Hello there, and welcome to Beyond the Surface, where the saying to be seen is to be understood comes to life. I want to begin by first honouring the traditional custodians of the land we live and work on. I live and work on Gundungurra land, and I acknowledge the traditional landowners of my guests near and far. I pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging, for they hold the memories, the traditions, and cultures of our First Nations people. The land below my feet is, was, and always will be Aboriginal land. I'm no stranger to the profound journey of pain, grief, anger, and heartbreak that often accompanies the loss of church, community, faith, and the unwinding of our core beliefs. In the midst of this, though, I found healing in the stories shared by others who walked a similar path to me. Here in the warmth of these digital walls, I want you to feel at home. This is a space where your memories and your story is not just acknowledged, but deeply seen and believed. So kick back, relax, and let's embark on a journey where your story is not just heard, but embraced. I want to welcome you to a community where storytelling is a powerful force. This is Beyond the Surface. Welcome, Liz. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me, Sam. It's good to be here.
I'm so excited for this conversation. What now? I can't remember the name of it, but people will know you from the Practice Co. But there was, what was it named before that?
Oh, oh, geez. It was called Pocket Fuel before that. I know, very, very. Ugh. But the idea was my husband and I, oh God, here we go. We're just launching straight into it. So we were pastors in a church, and a decade ago, we're both creative, and I don't know, we just decided we needed something else to do. So we thought we'd start a daily devotional. As pastors, we found that, as you do, as
Why
pastors,
not?
we found that people had trouble connecting their sense of spirituality that they felt on a Sunday in with their everyday life. So we thought, why don't we create something that's easy to access, easy to understand, bite-sized, not filled with, Christian super jargon, just really kind of organic and down to earth. So they could kind of bring their sense of spirituality into their everyday. And so Pocket Fuel was the very cliched name of having like daily fuel in your pocket on your phone. So that name didn't last long. We changed it.
It's funny because I remember when I first met you in the Zoom call that we had. I remember looking it up afterwards and seeing on the website that it used to be called Pocket Fuel, and I remember thinking,
Jesus.
"Oh my gosh, I had that app!" Like,
no, you did not.
I did, and I was like, "Oh my goodness." How did I mean, obviously, I know how I didn't know that it was now the Practice Co because I haven't used it for so long. But oh my goodness, I could not believe it. I was like, I even said to my wife, I was like, "Do you remember an app called Pocket Fuel?" And she's like, "No." She's like, "What is that?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, how did you not know that?" It was like all of our friends had it. Like we would talk about it. Yeah, we would talk about what was in there, and like it was such a it was general conversation for us. Like, so I
That's
just could not
hilarious.
believe the connection when I made it. It was so funny.
I'm speechless.
Oh gosh. So you and your husband were pastors. Tell me,
Yes, we were.
where would you say that your story starts?
Oh, I mean, my parents got saved watching Jimmy Swaggart on the TV when I was 2 years old.
I have
So,
no idea who that is. Should I know who that
oh my
is?
Lord, Jimmy Swaggart was an American TV evangelist.
Right.
So
Okay.
he was akin to the Benny Hinns
Oh, right.
and the
Okay.
very ostentatious services with music and emotional altar calls, and very highly, now that I know what's what, emotionally manipulative salvation calls.
Okay, right.
They got saved watching Jimmy Swaggart when I was 2, and so I think my parents quickly found a sense of belonging in Australian Pentecostalism in the
Mm-hmm.
AOG church. And by the time I was 12, my dad was a pastor, an assistant pastor in an AOG church. So
Wow.
heavily entrenched in Australian Pentecostalism from a very young age.
Yeah,
I guess
absolutely.
that's where it starts.
To go from nothing to being pastors of a church in a decade, that's huge.
It's huge. And it's also very, we're just going to dive straight in,
Yeah, I
right?
love
It's
it.
also very indicative of how these organizations work.
Mm.
So, and no slight to my parents at all, but to become a pastor, you didn't really have to do much except be available.
Mm.
And I think in the type of church that we grew up in, and I guess we'll cover this story a little bit more as we talk. My dad was diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. And so
Mm.
becoming a pastor, I think, was something that was fulfilling for him as well. And so he felt a need for the church, and that church felt a need for him, and Bob's your uncle. Like, that's how that all began. But
Yeah.
I see that not just in my family, looking back now, because growing up a pastor's kid and going to state conferences and going to other conferences and being around pastors a lot, you
Mm.
could see this pattern, copied all over the place, where you didn't really have to have too many credentials or go through too many checks and balances or anything like that to become a pastor in the Pentecostal movement, especially back in the 80s and 90s. And so I might get in trouble for saying a few of these things, or maybe that's just my spiritual trauma having a moment and going, holy shit, am I going to get in trouble for saying this?
No, I mean, I think anybody who has, I don't even think it's specific to the Pentecostal church. I think it's just
Not at all.
specific to organized religion in general, that there are certain types of people that lend themselves to pastoral ministry roles. And, the sad fact is that they're not always the good type of people sometimes. So,
It becomes a cycle, I think. I
yeah.
think that sometimes the role fulfills not so much of a healthy need in a human
Mm.
being, that church needs that role, and it kind of perpetuates itself into an unhealthy cycle of dependence and validation and authority,
Yeah.
which isn't the kind of foundation you want when you're trying to build a spiritual community.
Mm.
So,
Not a safe one anyway.
yeah, not a safe one, not a safe
Mm.
one.
Yeah. What is it like growing up as a pastor's kid?
Oh, I don't know. I ruined Christmas for all my friends.
I bet you did.
I, you know, I'm like an Enneagram 4. I'm a drama queen. I so excited about Christmas. And then when I learned that Jesus was the reason for the season,
Mm.
and all my friends in kindergarten were talking about Santa, I'm like, guys, I have to
Yeah.
set the record straight. And I enjoyed setting that record straight. But I didn't, obviously I didn't understand that nobody else lived the way that we lived, or not many other people lived the way that we lived. So, from the very outset, I was quite fanatical, very involved in church, which had its good sides and bad sides. The good side of it was when things were bad at school, I had a whole other community of people that I could rely on, that I could turn to, another community that I could be a part of, not just the school community, because we all know school can be quite interesting for a number of different reasons for all different kinds of
Rough was
people.
the first word that came to my mind.
Rough, rough. And so that was part of the good side of it, was having a community where I knew I was accepted, as long as I played by the rules. But I knew that I was accepted.
Yeah.
And, then I got to play piano, I got to sing, I got to be involved in different things that I may not have been able to had I not been involved in a community such as our faith community. But the church came first all the time. So if it was my birthday, if it was a special occasion, church always came first. We were out a lot at church events. I didn't really know this until I was deep in my 20s, but I just grew up so bubbled and so unaware of how the world worked. And when you're in these types of faith communities, and I'm speaking very generally, I'm sure that it's not like this in all faith communities, but mine, um, you were actually taught not to have critical awareness. So you weren't just taught, you weren't taught about critical awareness. Critical awareness was spoken against. So when it came to matters of politics, you were just taught to kick the Lord's man. You weren't taught to actually weigh up. I should say the Lord's man or woman, but back then it was definitely all men when I was a child.
Yeah.
You weren't taught to weigh things up, to consider things, to question, to seek, to balance things out. You weren't taught that at all. You were taught to have this kind of trust that was unquestioning and completely, I can't find the word that I'm looking for, but surrendered, not in a healthy way, in a I just need to submit. I hate that word because this is what God would have me do. So it was a great upbringing and a great childhood, and I had I had a great community around me in some ways, but I didn't realize until I was a little bit older the damaging effects of being in a community so bubbled and insular to the world around them.
Yeah. What was
Yeah.
it like to come to that realization?
Oh God, it was humiliating.
Yeah.
I remember thinking, because I've always enjoyed banters around politics. I did very well in school. This is going to sound egotistical, but I always considered myself to be quite well educated and could hold a good conversation. And I enjoyed, back and forths about all different types of topics and issues. And then when the realization dawned on me that most of my ideas were inherited and it was rhetoric that I had just learned to, um, you know, copy and speak on my own and not stuff that I'd actually come up with on my own. I felt really humiliated, and it took me quite a long time to find my feet, find my confidence again after that in myself.
Yeah. It is a bit of a copy and paste cycle, right? Like you just get fed these one-liners almost that you just like spill out all over the place. And all of a sudden, there comes a point where the penny drops and you realize my words are not even my own.
Exactly. Exactly. I remember writing an email. I cannot bring myself to tell you the content of the email because it's so shameful. But I
Oh,
remember writing an email into Parliament, when I was in my early 20s. And now I look back at what I wrote and I can't believe for the life of me as a feminist, now as, someone who is listening to all kinds of different people's stories and trying to have an understanding of what is going on, not just in our country, but around the world for different types of people. The content of that email was just horrendous, and I have repented many a time for it.
and I
So,
think that is one of the hardest things about, I guess, what is coined the process of deconstruction or, untangling your faith after there, is, I guess, a shift internally, is that realization of, oh crap, like I perpetuated the harm that I've now
exactly.
just realized. And
Mm-hmm.
the guilt and the, just that unrelenting feeling of, oh my gosh, like what I'm now what I'm experiencing now, I did that. I caused
Mm-hmm.
harm. And that's a really difficult
Absolutely.
thing to come to terms with. Facebook memories do
Yeah.
not, like, oh my gosh, the
Sorry, I just laughed and fell off my chair.
Oh, it was probably really apt timing, to be honest. Facebook memories, I tell you what, they are not good for the self-esteem. Like I shared
Not one bit.
I shared one that I had posted like a decade ago with a friend not too long ago, where it was like, every time you share a post on Facebook about Jesus, the devil is like taking a punch, and it was just like
Yeah.
so um not just unrealistic, but it was just like so extreme, like
Mm.
and like let's just there is no happy medium here. It was like, I will always describe myself as um when I was part of the church, I would have said that I was a black and white Christian. I was that person. I was all or nothing. There was nothing in between. And so,
Yeah.
how could you not share this random post on Facebook that, if I didn't share it, what if God knew that?
Oh, I grew up exactly the same way. The
Yeah.
whole black and white thing, all or
Yeah.
nothing. If you're lukewarm, you're going to be
Mm,
spat out of the mouth of God, or whatever that
yeah.
wild saying was. Yeah, I actually made it a practice to go through and delete old Facebook memories, and I didn't do it
Mm,
like, obviously I was ashamed of some of the things that I said, but I am now, and who I want myself to be in the world couldn't stand behind some of those things that I'd said. And some
mm,
of the pictures that because I was a pastor and I preached and did a whole lot of that. So photos of myself preaching,
yeah.
what those photos did in me too, I deleted them for my own self-care. But I didn't want somebody who'd come across my work now to go back and do a deep dive on Facebook and find some things that would be confusing. So I don't feel any shame about deleting some of
Yeah.
those posts, because I know when I was posting them, because I don't know about you, but I know, as I came into being my own person, so around 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, you start, or even younger, but you start having this thought in the back of your mind, the very base level of your body, that was at odds with
Mm,
what you were taught from the pulpit, because your own experience in the world my own experience in the world wasn't lining up with what I was being taught from the pulpit, but I wasn't ready yet, and I didn't know how to acknowledge that or to accept that truth. So you almost live with two selves
mm,
for a lot of the time. And I know a lot of those posts were not posted from my true self. It was
mm.
posted from the woman who was afraid she'd be smited by
Yeah.
God, afraid that I wasn't faithful enough
Mm.
or evangelizing enough or doing enough or being enough. So a lot of those posts were done out of fear and not out of who I really, know myself to be now. So delete, delete, delete.
Yes. I mean, you do what you need to do. I think you're right. It is one of those things where um the posts are not authentic. The posts are just this mask that you put out into the world to make sure that you are still fitting the mold that you
Yeah.
needed to be. Every post that I would share was like another brick in the wall of like, just keep appearing straight, just keep appearing straight. The queer community, like the cognitive dissonance that is happening is
Mm.
just like unrelenting. And so,
Yeah.
you're right. It is not an authentic sense of spirituality that's going out into the world. It is the
No.
sense of spirituality that you want your pastors to see you put out, so that they
Yeah.
don't question anything, and so that you don't get the message going, hey, do you want to catch up for a coffee? And that that's the accountability chat, because they've come across something or somebody has told them, hey, maybe you need to check in on Sam. Like, maybe she's not doing okay. Like, we need to make sure that
Mm.
she's not straying and things like that. And so you put out into the world what is going to make your life easier.
Yep. And wants to assure your
Yeah.
place in the community,
Yeah.
because The community that I grew up in very much used, and nobody, if I confronted those leaders now, they would unequivocally deny that they used manipulation and control as a means to gather and create a community. But the problem is systemic. The problem isn't individual. And so the community that I grew up in, the story of faith was you're either in and you confess Jesus is Lord, or you're out and you're going to hell. And you can't be a part of what we're doing. You can't be in the inner sanctum unless you A, B, C, D. And I desperately needed to be wanted and needed and belong, because, when you grow up hearing that you're nothing without Jesus, that your body is sinful and you can't trust yourself, your heart is wicked above all things, then you need that external validation. You need your tribe to want you and to need you. And when it becomes so desperate, and for me, a lot of it, I know it wasn't, but it felt life and death. It felt like, oh God, if I don't do this, I'm going to lose the little bit that I have. Then you put that front up and you play it till the cows come home so that you can belong. Unfortunately.
Absolutely. And it comes down to, I guess, that notion that one thing can lead you down the wrong path, and it's a slippery slope, that one thing will just like send you right down. And so it is like every interaction, every post, anything was oh my gosh, what if this is a moment? Like, what if this is one of those predestined moments where like the decision that I make is going to make, a difference for my life in 20, 30, 40 years time. And you sort of take that destiny approach to literally every interaction that you have.
I remember having a moment, because I eventually went on to go to Bible college. I turned down a law degree, which is the smartest decision I ever made in my life, to go to Bible college.
I mean, how very that is like good Christian girl thing to do.
Sacrifice for the kingdom.
I know.
Up there.
Yeah.
I was at Bible college, and which was in Sydney, and at a place that shall not be named. And my grandparents lived in Sydney, and my nana was dying. And the year that I was in Bible college, she was dying, because I came from Northeast Victoria at that point. And I had 1 year with my nana and my grandfather, who's the best man I've ever known. And she wasn't doing well, and I had classes, but I wanted to go see her. And I stood at my car, and I could not make a decision because I was terrified that cutting class and going to see my dying nana meant that I was sinning and I was out of the will of God, and God couldn't protect me. And the kind of brain that I have was like running down all the rabbit holes. Well, if God can't protect me, then maybe I'll have an accident on the M2 and I'll die, because there's no grace for you when you sin, because you're out from the covering of God and the blessing of God. And
my goodness.
I just remember sitting in my car for about half an hour. I did go, and I didn't have an accident. But it's really interesting, the whole idea of destiny, and thinking that every little choice that you made bared such consequence. It's a huge weight to carry.
Yeah. I remember the concept of predestination was like the beginning of the end for me. Like, that's how I sort of describe it. My year I did like half of the good Christian girl thing. So I didn't go like fully to theological college. I did a gospel gap year. Which was like mission, and we did certain like subjects from a theological degree and that sort of thing, and it was all intents and purposes, it was supposed to make me a stronger Christian. It was supposed to make me fall in love with God more, and all it did was create more questions, realistically. And I remember like grappling with the concept of predestination and going, well, if everything's predestined, then
like, what's the point? Like, what is the point of, anything? What's the point of prayer? What's the point of evangelism? What's the point of church? What's the point of anything? And I remember one of the elders in my church saying, it's just the way God designed it, and that's just what we follow. And I was like, yeah, well, that's not quite flying with me. Like,
No.
I want more than that. I want more than, well, this is just the way that it is.
Yeah.
And as someone from a non-Christian family, I was not raised in the church. I was like,
Wow.
well, this concept tells me that my family is going to hell. So, like, I want more than just, this is just the way it is. This is, just
Exactly.
like blind faith almost.
Mm-hmm.
So yes. What was Bible college like for you?
um, Bible college was a wake-up call.
Yeah.
Uh, so I grew up in regional New South Wales and Victoria, and I was a pastor's kid, and I had some level of success, we'll just say,
Yeah.
in that realm. I preached at a lot of youth events and was very involved, not just in my local level, but in a state level. Went to this, and I didn't realize how much I relied on that and fed off that as a people pleaser and as all of the things that I, now know what was going on. Highly codependent upon this relationship that I had with the church. So when I went to Bible college, I definitely was, a small fish in a big pond, coming from being, in a smaller pond.
Yeah.
And seeing the clicks that happened in that place and how things only happened for you, in inverted commas, if you knew certain people and were beneficial in certain ways, in certain areas. I went, oh, so this whole idea of calling and purpose isn't actually real. It's just all about how you look on stage, or who you're friends with, or how it's all connected. And I definitely wanted to get more of an academic sort of sense of theology and who God was, but all we did was serve at events and conferences and churches. If you can't guess where I went to Bible college now, just Google the news the last 12 months and you'll figure it out. But it was disappointing in that sense. However, I did meet two of my very best friends who I am still very best friends with now. And we've all deconstructed. Actually, there's a lot of us that have deconstructed and stayed in touch. And that's been the most beautiful thing. But yeah, Bible college was it was interesting because before Bible college, I had a year when I was in year 12, where I drank a lot and I partied a lot, but I would go out drinking because I kind of just knew that something wasn't working.
Yeah.
And I'd go out drinking and I'd go partying. I had these great friends and we'd have a great time. Get home at 4 a.m. I'd always sneak out my window. Parents had no idea, by the way. And so I'd sleep for 2 hours and then somehow get up and go lead worship and play piano, still kind of drunk, really. And I can't imagine how nobody picked up on it because I would have smelled terrible.
That's what perfume's for, Liz.
That's what perfume's for. But I used to hang my clothes up in front of the window for a couple of hours, and so I kind of had this moment before Bible college where I was challenged by the then youth pastor, and they're like, you got to put away childish things. You've got a call on your life. I had that coffee that we were talking about earlier, and they really confronted me, and I got scared, and I was like, okay, I've got to put away childish things. And so I was really into like I'm a bit of a nerd, so I was really into Celtic historical fiction and fantasy and folklore and poetry, and I draw, not work, and I had an altar in my bedroom. So I had this sort of alternate thing always happening with me. I loved crystals. I loved cards, like, or the idea of all of that. But I did that in secret. I've always made incense and doing all this stuff. And then I literally had this moment where I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to Bible college. And I took all the pictures down off my wall and I put all the books away and I went to Bible college. And then I got there and I'm like, oh, this is not what I've sacrificed my life for, but I've made a choice and I'm going to stick with it. And so I ended up only doing a year there, and I went back to work in my dad's church. And that was the next little chapter after that. So
it's such a common a commonality in people's stories that there was always a drawing, a connection, or an interest in the things that were considered demonic or evil, or, you know, like, I mean, I remember I always have been drawn to also crystals, oracle cards, tarot, Wicca, all of that sort of realm. And I remember being absolutely hauled over the coals for going and watching Twilight, the movie. Like, it was just like, I remember that series was just, it was used as like a signpost almost of like, do not conform to the ways of the world. Like, and it was just like, I remember being hauled over the coals over something like that. And I was like, guys, it's just a movie. Like, there was still that part of me that was just like, surely life cannot be this intense. Like, surely. Like, it cannot be this black and white, this intense, this like, surely there are things in the middle. Like,
oh my gosh. No, but it's black and white, remember? It's all or nothing.
Yeah.
And it's Harry Potter for me.
Oh, yes. It's always one of those two, isn't it?
Always one of those two.
Oh my goodness. It's funny how, you know, you sort of described what you actually did at Bible college, which was just a whole lot of being useful realistically. And that's kind of what it is. Like, as long as you are useful, then we'll keep you. As soon as you don't fit that, as soon as you step even just like an inch outside of the mold we have created for you, not God, they have, like, as humans have created for you, you're stepping outside the boundaries. Like, you are, you know, being led astray and, you know, all of that sort of jargon. But realistically, you're just no longer useful to what they want to create, the image that they want to set. Which is like super great for the self-esteem, right?
Did wonders for mine.
I know. Like, if you can't hear the sarcasm, it's very sarcastic. Like, I mean, you come out of like leaving, I guess I tend to use the term organized religion, but any sort of like faith-based community, with just absolutely no sense of who you are, right?
None. No. And I felt shredded. I remember looking at myself in the mirror. So I was 19 when I went to Bible college. I was 30. How old am I now? Oh my God. I was like 31 when we left church. And I remember looking in the mirror in those first few weeks, and I just felt like a stranger to myself and a shell. Like, I had no idea. And it was baffling. You can't, unless you've experienced that, I don't know how to describe it other than I just look at myself in the mirror and go, I don't even know who you are. I don't even know who I am. Yeah,
absolutely. I completely agree. I think it is one of the common things that people sort of experience. And I tend to find that the people who have that experience were the black and white Christians. We were the all or nothing, and we genuinely were in it. Like, we were not the lukewarm Christians. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about it today. It wouldn't have had the impact. But
exactly.
I mean, I remember the day that I decided to start dating my now wife. And I remember thinking, yikes, this is going to be fun. Like I knew what it was going to be like in some sense, but I don't think I had realized that, I wouldn't just lose community or friends or anything like that. I lost everything that made me me. And there is somebody who, and Jane always brings it up. Where is Jane when you need her? There is someone in this field that describes it as a shattering of self. And it is the most accurate picture or imagery that I can think of, because you just have absolutely no idea who you are. Like you said, it is like a stranger. And it is one of those things that is the most bizarre feeling. I would imagine at this point, you are married, kids?
Yes. We'd been married. So we got married as babies, as people often do.
Of course. What else would you do?
And so we'd been married for, almost 10 years at that point. We had two little kids, a 3-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. And our story is a little bit unique, maybe because my parents were the senior pastors of our church, and then we found out my dad had been living a double life, and he got very dramatic. He got fired pretty much. He had to resign straight away, and so we lost. And both my husband and I were on staff at church at that point. And so they both lost their jobs, they lost their incomes, they lost their friends, everything overnight. And so that happened about 2.5 years before we actually eventually left church, because I think that 2.5, at that point, when everything went down with my dad, we were like, look, we can hold on. We believe in God. We're here to serve people. We're going to hold on. And we did. And we held on. We did the work. We tried not to shove things under the carpet, and we tried to really show up to what was happening and to people and to ourselves and to our own pain. But also, when you grow up in that kind of an environment, and not every faith community is like this, but there was no psychologists on staff, there was no counseling, there was just prayer and the word of God. Like, we had no idea what we were going through psychologically or even physically. The effect that it had on my body in particular has been one of the most incredible experiences of my life. But so that sort of happened 2.5 years before we eventually left. And the way that our particular denomination handled my family and the situation was the beginning of the end for me. And all of those little whispers that I'd felt in my body and in my heart got louder and louder and louder the more poorly we were treated, the more poorly my mother was treated, because my mum, such a beautiful and faithful woman, and she was a senior pastor alongside my dad, and my dad left, and I don't speak to my dad anymore, and it was very painful for my mum. And my mum, who was sort of the innocent in this situation, how she was treated was just completely deplorable. How we were all treated was deplorable. And so over the next 2.5 years, we got new senior pastors, and things. Jesse and I, my husband and I, were accused of trying to get the church for ourselves and do all of this stuff. And I just allowed myself to think for the very first time the thoughts that I'd had all along, but I kind of allowed myself to hear them and be present to them. That this isn't really about my well-being. This doesn't feel like it's about my well-being or my health. And one of the pivotal moments for me was when our new senior pastors started, and they were quite influential, and so they had quite a following and quite a name, and it was quite intimidating, them coming. Like, I wanted to do a good job and I wanted to impress them and I wanted to keep my job. So I was having a conversation with another pastor on staff, and she just said to me, look, they don't want to hear about your parents. They don't want to hear about what you've been through. Your job is to say yes.
Oh,
Just get to
gosh.
work and say yes. And I remember sitting in that chair going, nodding, like my body going, yes, that's what I'm going to do. But my body just going, oh my God, I'm in so much pain. And I'm going to cry. And I don't have anywhere to put this pain.
Oh,
I don't
my
have
goodness.
anything, I'm losing my words now. Don't have anywhere to put it.
Yeah.
And so by the time we left, and it wasn't a conscious decision to leave, when the new pastors came on staff, we'd been through a lot, and we would walk the beach every night, my husband and I, with our kids, just to debrief, just to, get some of the energy out of our bodies. And we're like, we'll give it 2 years. We'll give this 2 years. We're still young enough to start again if we need to. And we'll see what happens in 2 years. And it just was the worst 2 years of our lives. Even then, I don't think I would have left if my husband didn't leave before me, because I didn't have the skills or the language to do it. And it took Jesse, because we were both on staff. By the time we left, I was no longer on staff. I was doing graphic design and subcontracting. But my husband was a campus pastor. We were both campus pastors, but he was employed to be the campus pastor. And he put in his resignation. And we thought, oh, we'll still be a part of the church. We'll still come back. We'll resign and we'll get new jobs. And then maybe we can have a bit of a better relationship with church. So resigned, finished up on our last day, packed the kids up, jumped in the car, drove down the coast of Victoria to visit family. And on that trip, the wheels just fell off. And, we had no idea, separately and together, I think, what would happen after that last day on staff. But we never went back. And it wasn't we're going to leave, you suckers. It was oh my God, now that we don't have to pretend. And I don't think we even knew that we were pretending. I just think we thought we were working hard. I think we thought we were surrendering. I think we thought we were doing the right thing, choosing the higher way, giving into the flesh and all of those things. But when we finally were able to give ourselves a bit of distance from that world, it was like, oh my God, this is what we actually think. And thank God for Jesse, because on that trip, and I won't speak for him and his experience, but on that trip, he was able to say, oh, I'm not doing this anymore. And I was so relieved. I had that dual experience of being so relieved that someone said it out loud. Because if Jesse's not going to church, I'm sure as hell not going to church. But I felt so guilty, the dissonance, the dualness that was going on. If we don't go to church, we are. Can I say fucked?
You can. Yeah.
And so, but such relief at the same time. But yeah, we were in our mid-30s, 2 little kids, no other skills or training to speak of. So we both employed there. So we had to start again pretty much from nothing. Mid-30s, fun times, guys.
Yeah, I know.
But
Barrel
actually also the best thing that ever happened to us ever. So,
and I mean, I think, you sort of, like, as you said, it wasn't a conscious, it wasn't like, we're out to get you or anything like that. And I find that it very rarely is when I speak to
very
people.
rarely.
But we often will get tarnished with the brush that we're just, bitter sinners who are just out to, hate on church and hate on God. And it is just the furthest from the truth for a lot of people. And that doesn't mean that there's not anger, because there is like very real visceral anger, but it's not like hatred often, and not straight away. I think it's just
straight away.
It's hurt and it's exhaustion and it's, it's all of those things that you are physically feeling. And I wonder, was there a part of you that sort of held on for that 2 years? Because, like, if you didn't, you had like things crumbling in your family at the same time, to have both of those, you know, as strands of security and stability for you crumble at the same time, perhaps could have been disastrous.
Oh, exactly. And I remember thinking at the time when things went down with my dad, the state executive came in, and basically Jesse and I were told, you'll never work in a church again after this. What's happened with your dad, you'll never work in a church again. No one will touch you.
Yeah.
Exact words. No one will touch you. And I'm standing there thinking, I haven't done a fucking thing wrong. If anything, I'm the one who's here. Like,
yeah, exactly.
And I just was like, I'm going to prove you wrong. Like, I am. The things that were said about us, my husband and I definitely was like, no. And there was a little bit, my back was up, and I'm like, no, I'm going to prove to you how much I can stay in this. And that was part of the unveiling of how the system works for me. Because I know that a lot of pastors and a lot of people in church, I really want to make sure I communicate this. They're not bad people.
Yeah, absolutely.
At all. And I know when I was a pastor, and even when I said the most dickish, horrible things to people, my intention was good. And I know that's probably problematic, but I was there because I really genuinely wanted to help people. And I know that a lot of pastors are really there to genuinely want to help people. Yeah. But when you peek behind the curtain and you can see how the sausage is made, and how the system works, I remember thinking, okay, this is what happens. You get kicked when you're down. Yeah. And I'm like, they eat their young, they leave their wounded behind. Yeah. And, I was determined in the beginning to not have that happen to me. Yeah. But I couldn't stop it from happening. Yeah. And
I think for a lot of people, when I hear, particularly those who are on staff of churches, I mean, I was serving, but we were not a church where those who served were paid. And so, but I find that those who are part of a church where there is staff and there is income, that there comes a point where you realize that church is just a business and it is a system.
Yep. And I remember being in meetings. Yeah. Exactly. Where, you know, the subject of the offering message would come up, and it would be, you can't talk about this because people don't give when you talk about that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, okay, this is different from the little country church that I grew up in. But it's a daunting realization when you begin to understand the inner workings of some of these institutions. Yeah.
What was the process of healing like for you?
Oh, this is what I love to talk about. Yeah,
this is the good part. It's like that there's a video and it's like, let's skip to the good part.
Exactly. Because look, while it was horrendous, like I said before, I met my two best friends in Bible college, and I was just on a call to one of them today, Jessica, who lives in Melbourne, and we chatted for a good hour. And, you know, like, so there were some beautiful things that happened in those times. It wasn't all bad, but healing from all of that has, it started with looking at myself in the mirror and going, who am I? And what I found surprising after I left church was that my body just started to shut down. Yeah. And I ended up getting really physically sick. It was not what I was expecting. And I think originally, you know, when I first left church, I was like, yes, I'm going to have all this time. I'm going to have all this energy, get my weekends back. Like, because I'd grown up in church, I'd never had a weekend. No. We would go to holidays. We would go to church on holidays. Do you know what I mean? Like, we'd be in some camping ground up the coast and we'd find a church to go to. So I'm like, I'm going to get my weekends back. This is going to be great. I'm going to get fit. I'm going to get healthy. I'm going to do all these things. And my body just went, nah. And over the course of about 4 years, I just became so chronically ill to the point where I was sleeping 1 to 2 hours a night, broken sleep. I had 2 little kids. I was in constant pain. I had gut issues. I'd break out in hives every other week. I'd get every virus that was going around. Nobody could tell me what was wrong with me. the Western medical system it was like, take some antidepressants and live with it. And I'm like, that can't be it. And that's when I came across somatic healing and how, stress can cause illness in the body, and it's a mind-body connection, not just something that's physical. Because I think one of the things growing up Pentecostal and hearing about miracles all the time is I was just so used to looking for the one thing that would heal me. I'm going to go out the front, I'm going to get prayed for, and I'm going to get healed, and it's going to be instant.
Yeah.
Then I'm going to get better. You don't have to do any work. You don't have to go to physio. You don't have to go change your diet. You don't have to take a bunch of different medications to find out which one works. You just go up the front for prayer, and God's going to do it for you in an instant.
Yeah, because all of those other things mean that you don't trust God, right?
Exactly. And it was so interesting. And what I still find today, 10 years on, is that there's still these imprints of some of these beliefs alive in my body.
Yeah.
So when I first got sick, I was like, there's just going to be something out there that I take, and it will heal everything. It will fix everything. I didn't have the skills to do any kind of work, because we either lived in chaos week to week in church, or you just got prayed for everything and then crossed your fingers, closed your eyes, and hope God would turn up.
Yeah.
So it was really a blessing to be thrown into, okay, I've got to do some work here. 2 kids. We were starting a business. Pocket Fuel was up and running. I had things to do, and I'm like, okay, I make some choices here, and I've got to make some changes. And slowly showing up and doing the work and taking care of myself, which isn't candles and incense and baths and all of it. Can involve that, but more often than not, it was, you need to go for a walk today, honey. You need to get some sun. You need to get your blood moving. You need to have a shower. Eat some food, please. Eat some food.
Yeah.
And maybe not a food that's going to make you sick. Eat some food that's going to nurture you. Do some things for yourself. Go to bed and stay off your phone. So see a therapist. That was the most surprising thing for me, was the physical nature of the healing became the most urgent thing that I needed to attend to. And it took a couple of years, but my body started to heal, and I started to really find myself physically, which was interesting because we didn't think that I could have babies again because of how sick I was. And I had endometriosis and all of these different chronic conditions. So I fell pregnant by surprise at 36.
Wow.
After my other 2 kids were in school, and had so much trouble falling pregnant with the other 2 that it was just a wild roller coaster ride. And I'm sorry if that's triggering for people, because I know pregnancy and fertility is such a big, and I've been on both spectrums of it. And so then, we fell pregnant with this kid later in life, but, that wasn't particularly planned at all. That brought so much healing to my life too, because this was the first child that I'd had outside of organized religion, where I could just be with my child, and I could just have my child. And there was no pressure for it to be anything other than what it was. And I remember being in the delivery room when he came out. The other 2, we were pastors, and the idea of miracle is so connected with Christianity, but to experience that this side of things was so healing. Miracles still do exist. I can still feel so connected to the divine, to the ground of being, to the energy that got this whole thing started. It was so concentrated in that moment when I had Ollie, who's 5 and screaming upstairs right now, but he's fine. So the physical side of it really took me by surprise and became the very urgent thing. Then after I had 5 years ago, that's when the emotional, mental stuff really kicked in. And I started to attend to some of those needs of mine as well. And my therapist has been beyond, life-saving, life-changing. the work that I've done with my therapist to rewrite some of those narratives and to even understand what I'd gone through. Because
Yeah,
I think
put
even
language to it.
put language to
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
even because we do a lot of work. When I first started seeing her, she prescribed a lot of cult documentaries. She's like, you need to watch every cult documentary that you can put your hands on. You need to listen to cult podcasts, read books about cults. And I'm like, right, no, like this is too much. She goes, you have to understand what you were in.
Yeah.
Because when you're in something like that and experiencing the kinds of things that some of us experience, I had no language for it, had no critical awareness for it, didn't understand what had happened in my body and in my mind and in my heart. That's been revolutionary for me to understand what had happened to me in order to be able to rewrite some of those narratives and pathways that I built in my brain. I don't even know where we're up to with your question. So I
Oh
went on
no,
this
it's fine. I don't do things in a linear fashion. I just roll
I
with
love it.
What brings you joy and peace now?
Simple things. We live sort of by the coastal community, and the beach is just such a place of connection for me. I'm on it most days, just walking, being in fresh air. Birds, if you follow me on Instagram, I'll often post videos of birds that I find, because birds are beautiful. Like, birds are the most freaking best thing. They're beautiful. They sound beautiful. They fly.
Yeah.
Like simple things, jigsaws. I love a good jigsaw. It's not
I
complicated.
noticed. And aren't you doing a jigsaw at the moment that is birds?
I finished it. I just finished it late last night. Birds. A bird jigsaw puzzle. Best thing in the world. But like, just simple things. It doesn't have to be complicated. I think that's one of the things that I've learned, in high control religion and environments. You're striving, you're climbing that mountaintop.
It's
You are
exhausting.
getting into the presence of God.
I know.
It's too much.
Like, people are just always yelling at you. Like,
oh the Lord.
It's not just like, it's just like a sensory overload. There is no way that I would ever be able, I mean, aside from all of like the triggering aspects of sitting in a church service now, but just even like, you will watch random reels on Instagram or something about and I'm just like, you don't realize until after you've left how much you are yelled at from the stage or from the pulpit. Like, why so mad? Like, it's
so noisy.
Constant. Like, churches are not for people who have sensory issues, not Pentecostal churches anyway.
Not Pentecostal churches.
My former church would have been quite okay. But there was, I mean, that's a whole nother story. But anyway,
so good.
Oh, I have been finishing these episodes by asking everybody the same question, which is, what would you say to somebody who is in the depths? They've just come out, they're just like, they're looking at things and it is just this giant tangled mess that they have no idea what to do with. What would you say to that person?
Straight away, I would just say, be where you are. Be where you are. Because I think one of the hardest transitions for me to make and the most freeing realization that I had was, where I am is where I am, which sounds ridiculous, except that I was always working to be better. I was always working to be holier. And then as a pastor in the Pentecostal movement, everything was, this person could go to hell. We've got to work on this. We've got to do services. We're working week to week. It's chaotic. It's frenetic. There's like, you're always thinking 10,000 steps ahead, and then you're always thinking 10,000 steps behind. And the current moment is never enough. Like, growing up for me, the current moment was never enough. We're always needing more and wanting to be somewhere else. And even though there might be a lot of work ahead and in front of you, there's time for that. And you don't have to, there's no urgency here. There's nothing that you need to do so urgently that you can't just be where you are and do the next right considered action, which is probably eat some good food, get some sunshine,
Have
drink
sleep.
some water,
Yeah, have a
get some
nap.
sleep.
Yeah.
Enjoy Schitt's Creek for a couple of hours
Oh
on
my
a
gosh,
Saturday
it's so good.
The best thing ever.
Yeah, it really is.
Just chill, just be where you are,
Yeah.
relax. Because I think everything is so held and tight that one of the hardest things for me to learn to do is just to let myself be and to just be where you are. You can't really be anywhere else except for where you are.
I love that. And it's the most ironic thing because, the amount of times that I would quote, be still and know. And it's like, no one is still in the church. No one is ever still. Like, it just doesn't happen. Your mind is not still. You're not still. There's always something to do. There's always someone that you need to talk to. There's another conversation that could lead someone to the Lord. There's always something else. And so, ironically, rest in the stillness. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds cliche and I kind of hate it because, like, I remember, you want the dot point list. You want to know how you're going to get yourself out of it.
Yeah.
But I think there's healing to be found in the fact that you're probably going to be doing bits and pieces of this work. It's going to evolve with you as you grow and as you age and as you experience different things, and to just take the pressure off to have to heal even.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think people forget, and we get caught up in the work, like in inverted commas, the work of healing, that we forget that like rest and joy and pleasure, and that's all part of healing as well.
Oh, yes, and
It can't
amen.
always be work. That's not healing. That's just, it's just servitude constantly. So I think we forget that all of those things are part of healing as well. And unless we consciously make a choice to do them, it will get forgotten about. And the list will still be there. I mean, heck, I'm only I feel like 5% through my list. And I don't think, your trauma is going nowhere. That is the reality. Like, your trauma, your experience, the grief is going nowhere. You will just learn to expand around it as you move through time, and you don't need to be expanding all the time.
No, you're here to live.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let yourself enjoy it for a bit.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks so much for sharing, Liz.
Oh, thanks for having me.
It's been so nice.
Beautiful.
I'm sure there is probably so much more that we could have talked about.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Oh,
well, next time we chat, I will interview you because I want to hear about your story.
I love that. It's like, it's on my perpetual to-do list of the fact that, I do plan to do my own episode for this podcast, but as of the 17th of November, which is today, I have still yet to do it. I think I'm just going to get my wife to do it with me, to be honest. I think I'm just going to get her to ask me stuff because it's just, I don't want to just sit here and talk to no one. I like talking to people. It's why I'm a therapist. So, but yes, I have loved hearing more about your story, and I'm sure there will be many more opportunities. But thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Beyond the Surface. Until next time, take care, stay true to who you are, and remember, your voice and your story matters, always.